Working late is never fun, but that night felt especially rough. The exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders as I stood on the nearly empty platform, waiting for the train. The station lights cast a cold yellow glow, and the wind howled, cutting right through my jacket. I was alone, or at least I thought I was at first. There was someone else on the platform, a man who didn't exactly look like he belonged. He had his back to me, wearing a dark coat with a hood, moving strangely, almost like he was swaying or muttering to himself. I tried not to stare, but something about him made me uneasy, and I just couldn't shake it. I decided to move further down the platform, keeping him in the corner of my eye just in case. The lights flickered, making me jump. It wasn't unusual for that to happen in older stations, but at that hour, tired and alone, everything felt creepy. I blinked a few times, trying to calm down, but when I glanced back, the man was gone. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly turned around, searching for him, but I didn't see anyone. The silence was deafening, and then I heard it. Slow, steady footsteps coming from behind me. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I tried telling myself I was just imagining things, that exhaustion was playing tricks on me, but the footsteps kept coming, getting closer. I turned around slowly, but the platform still looked empty. A chill ran up my spine, and I clutched my bag, trying to figure out what to do. I started walking toward the exit, even if it meant waiting for the next train somewhere less isolated. But before I could take more than a few steps, the lights flickered again, plunging everything into darkness for a brief moment. When the lights came back, something felt off. The air felt heavier, and the feeling of being watched was almost tangible. I turned around again, expecting to see the strange man, but the platform was still empty. That's when I noticed a shadow moving, but not in the way I expected. It seemed to slink along the walls without making a sound, like it was closing in on me. Fear took over, and I forced myself to walk faster, trying not to look like I was panicking. Every part of me screamed to get out of there, but the exit seemed terrifyingly far away. With each step I took toward the exit, the sounds behind me grew louder, like something or someone was right on my heels. My body went into full-on alert mode, and I knew I needed to leave as quickly as possible. I tried not to break into a run, afraid that any sudden movement might make things worse, but my legs started shaking. As I got closer to the stairs that led out of the station, the lights flickered again, plunging everything into darkness for a few seconds. I turned around, heart almost stopping, and saw a silhouette standing exactly where I'd been moments earlier. The figure didn't move, but something about it was profoundly wrong. It didn't stand like a normal person, and the silence around it was suffocating. Without thinking twice, I bolted up the stairs, fear pushing me to get as far away from there as possible. The platform lights came back on, but I was already outside the station, gasping for breath and adrenaline coursing through me. I glanced back, half expecting to see the figure chasing me, but there was nothing. The quiet of the nighttime street wrapped around me, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I kept walking, not daring to look back, my heart still racing, swearing I'd never wait alone for a train at that station again.
Babysitting wasn't exactly my dream way to spend the weekend, but I needed to save up for college. The family that hired me was nice, and the kids, Clara and Ben, were fun, even if they got into the usual mischief. Everything was fine that night. After a movie and some snacks, I put the kids to bed and went downstairs, ready to binge watch a series until their parents got home. The house was big and had that creepy old house vibe, with floors that creaked now and then, and shadows shifting with the wind outside. But I was used to it. Things changed about an hour later when Clara came downstairs with tears in her eyes. "There's a shadow man outside my window," she whispered, clutching her blanket tightly. I sighed, trying not to roll my eyes. The kids had watched a monster movie the week before, and I figured it was just another nightmare. "It was just a dream, Clara," I said, taking her back to her room. But even as I reassured her, I got this weird chill. Something about the way she spoke, her eyes wide with genuine fear, made my skin crawl. Still, I tucked her in and went back downstairs, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that was creeping up on me. Back in the living room, I tried convincing myself it was just a kid's imagination. But the unease wouldn't go away. The house was so quiet that every little sound seemed to echo. Then I heard a noise coming from the backyard, like leaves rustling, followed by a faint dragging sound. My whole body tensed up. I took a deep breath, trying not to freak out. Maybe it was just a cat or some animal passing through, but the sound felt different. I grabbed my phone and took a quick peek out the window, but I couldn't see anything in the dark. I was trying to calm myself down when the next sound froze me in place. A creaking noise coming from the back door, like someone was trying to open it. Suddenly, the whole house felt colder, and my heart started racing. I ran upstairs to the kids' room, locking the door behind me. Clara and Ben were awake and clearly terrified, and I tried my best to seem calm. "Everything's fine," I whispered, even though I didn't believe it. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't have enough cell service to call the police, and all I could do was keep the kids safe and hope the noise went away. The wait was awful. Every little sound from outside made me jump, and Clara and Ben clung to me, their eyes wide with fear. I tried not to show how scared I was, but inside, my heart was pounding like crazy. Then I heard footsteps downstairs, slow and deliberate, like someone wanted me to know they were there. The floor creaked, and I froze, paralyzed with fear, trying to figure out what to do. I was alone in this huge house with 2 kids, and the thought of facing whatever was out there made my blood run cold. I looked around and found an old kitty baseball bat in a drawer. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I put Clara and Ben in the closet, telling them to stay really quiet, and tried to brace myself. The footsteps stopped near the stairs, and then everything went silent again. The house was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. I knew I had to protect the kids, even though every instinct told me to run. I was praying for this nightmare to end. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then suddenly, I heard a sound right by the bedroom door, like someone was trying to turn the handle. My whole body locked up with fear, but I forced myself to grip the bat tightly. It felt like one of those horror movie moments you never expect to experience for real. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst. I took a deep breath and braced myself, hoping the door wouldn't open. I had no idea what I'd do if someone actually came in, but I knew I had to protect Clara and Ben. Out of nowhere, the noise stopped. I stood there, frozen, listening to the silence and trying to figure out what was happening. I waited a little longer, not moving, until I finally heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The front door opened, and the kids' parents walked in, laughing about something, completely unaware of what I had just been through. I ran to them, trying not to cry from the sheer relief, and told them everything that had happened. To this day, I still don't know who or what was out there, but I never agreed to a babysitting gig again without thinking twice.
Me and Marcos thought it'd be a great idea to take a road trip across the country. Everything was going smoothly until the GPS decided to lead us down some deserted country road in the middle of nowhere. You know, the kind of place where you don't see a single soul for miles. Yeah, that's where we were. We were laughing, blasting music, not having a clue that things were about to go downhill fast. Out of nowhere, the car started making a weird noise, and before we knew it, it just died. Wouldn't start back up, and all around us was nothing but fields and eerie silence. With no cell signal, our only option was to walk to the nearest house the GPS had marked. After about 20 minutes of walking, we finally found the place. It looked creepy as hell, with boarded up windows and a yard overgrown with weeds. But we didn't have much choice, so we decided to knock. When no one answered, we pushed the door open slowly, and it creaked loudly as it swung in. At first glance, the house seemed abandoned, but then we started noticing things that didn't make sense. There were dirty plates with old food on the table, and a dusty radio in the corner playing static. Marcos and I exchanged that this isn't right look, and fear started creeping in. That's when we heard footsteps upstairs. We froze. We definitely weren't alone. Panic started setting in. Marcos motioned for us to get out of there fast, and I didn't need him to tell me twice. We tried to back out quietly, but the floorboards creaked with every step, practically announcing our presence. Before we could reach the door, it slammed shut on its own, and a surge of adrenaline shot through me. We tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. We were trapped, and the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs, slow and deliberate, got closer and closer, like whoever or whatever was there wanted us to feel every second of dread. With my heart racing, we bolted to the kitchen, desperately looking for another way out. The window was locked and covered in dust, like it hadn't been opened in years. That's when we noticed something even creepier. On the kitchen counter was a notepad with the word welcome scribbled on it, and it looked fresh. Whoever lived there knew we were in the house. Then we heard the scrape of metal, like something heavy being dragged, and we knew we were out of time. We needed to find a way out, or we were screwed. Desperation kicked in, and we were moving clumsily, trying to find anything that could help. Marcos yanked open a drawer, but it was just filled with rusty junk. We heard another noise coming from the living room, like something heavy had fallen. That was all we needed to bolt down a hallway that led to the back of the house. We found a door to the basement, and even though the idea of going into a creepy basement wasn't ideal, it was our only shot to escape whatever was after us. We crept down the old, rotting wooden stairs, trying not to make a sound. The basement was pitch dark, except for a sliver of light coming through a grimy window. As we searched for an exit, Marcos tripped over something that felt like an old suitcase, and the thud echoed. I held my breath, waiting for footsteps rushing toward us. Instead, there was only heavy silence. We messed with the window, shoving it as hard as we could until it finally gave way. We climbed out, and the cool air outside felt like the sweetest relief, but we knew we weren't safe yet. We needed to run and not look back. We took off through the overgrown yard, the tall grass scratching at our legs, trying to put as much distance between us and that house as possible. The sky was getting darker, and the fear gave us a burst of energy I didn't even know I had. We could hear heavy footsteps behind us, and it didn't feel like our imagination. Marcos grabbed my arm and pulled me onto a narrow trail that led back to the road. We ran without looking back, our hearts pounding so hard it felt like they might burst out of our chest. The feeling of being hunted was so real, and every second we expected something or someone to catch up to us. We finally made it back to the road where our broken-down car sat. It looked like a lifeline, even though it was still dead as a doornail. We grabbed our phones and tried again, but there was still no signal. We leaned against the car, trying to figure out what to do next. That's when, in the eerie silence of the empty road, we saw headlights coming toward us. We waved our arms like maniacs, and the driver stopped. We explained everything as quickly as we could, and he let us in, promising to get us to safety. As I looked back, the house was almost swallowed up by the darkness, but the fear of what was out there will stick with me forever.
We left the mall later than we'd planned. My mom and I were loaded down with shopping bags, laughing about something silly we'd seen in a store. The multi-story parking garage was almost empty, the kind of place that makes you automatically more alert. The lights flickered every so often, casting weird shadows between the parked cars. I already had that uneasy feeling that we should probably hurry up, but I tried to brush it off. We were almost at our car when my mom stopped laughing and stared straight ahead. A man was hanging around near our vehicle. He looked kind of distracted, but something about him felt off. Probably just someone looking for their own car, my mom said, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the tension in her voice. We kept walking, trying to act normal, but the guy noticed us. He started following, walking in the same direction. My heart started pounding, and my mom gripped my hand tighter. I glanced at my phone, but the signal bar was almost empty. With no security guards in sight, the fear really set in. We had to think fast. The car was just a few steps away, but what if he tried something? My mom hit the car alarm button on the key fob, making the lights flash and the alarm blare through the garage. It was her way of trying to scare him off or draw attention, but the guy didn't even flinch. If anything, he seemed even more determined to get closer. I was shaking, but I knew I had to stay calm. "Come on, get in the car, quick," my mom whispered, trying not to sound terrified. We bolted to the car and she unlocked it. I jumped into the passenger seat while she scrambled to get into the driver's side. But before she could lock the doors, the man was only a few steps away. My mom struggled to get the key into the ignition, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. I was about to scream for help, even though I knew no one would probably hear. The guy was so close I could see his face, but before he could make a move, my mom finally got the car started. The engine roared to life and she floored it, speeding out of there as fast as she could. He stepped back, and we peeled out, not daring to look behind us. Only when we were back on the main road with the city lights around us did we realize how terrified we were. I've never underestimated the importance of staying alert in places like that ever again.
It was way too late for me to still be at the library, but my research paper deadline left me with no other choice. Most of the lights were already off, and the silence was so heavy I could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lamps above me. The librarian announced over the intercom that the library was about to close, so I hurried to pack up my stuff. That's when I realized the only other person left, a guy in a hoodie with a blank, intense stare, seemed to have been watching me all night. I tried not to think too much of it, telling myself it was probably just a coincidence. As I shoved my things into my backpack, I heard footsteps coming from the back of the shelves. They were slow, heavy, and definitely not getting further away. My mind started racing with all sorts of thoughts, and a chill ran up my spine. I tried to convince myself it was just the librarian doing a final walkthrough, but something about the sound felt off. I grabbed my stuff and stood up, trying to act casual, but my legs felt like lead. The library, once my favorite place to study, now felt like a dark maze where anything could happen. I started making my way to the exit, but the feeling of being watched only got stronger. Every step I took seemed to echo through the empty aisles, mixing with the persistent sound of footsteps behind me. I tried to glance over my shoulder without making it obvious, but I didn't see anyone. The tall bookshelves cast weird shadows, and I wondered if I was just being paranoid. Whatever it was, it didn't seem in any hurry. I paused for a second, waiting to hear those footsteps again, but the silence that followed was even creepier. My only way out was near the checkout area, and I forced myself to keep moving. I tried to remember if the automatic doors closed on their own, or if I'd have to push a button, but my mind was so clouded with fear that I couldn't think straight. Suddenly, I heard the crash of books falling from one of the aisles next to me, and I nearly dropped my backpack in shock. I glanced over, but all I saw were books scattered across the floor in shadows that seemed to shift. I knew I couldn't just stand there. Heart pounding, I started walking faster, fighting the urge to break into a run. My hands were sweaty, and I was gripping my backpack so tight my fingers hurt. The exit was right there, but the feeling that someone was following me kept getting stronger. Before I could speed up, I heard heavy breathing coming from somewhere between the shelves. My heart leapt into my throat, and I froze, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The emergency light near the door flickered, and for a split second, it lit up the face of someone hiding in the shadows. It was too terrifying to process. I didn't wait any longer. I ran like my life depended on it, practically throwing myself at the automatic doors that seemed to open way too slowly. When I finally got outside, the cold night air hit me, and I bolted straight for the well-lit street, not daring to look back. My heart was racing, and I knew right then and there I'd never want to study that late at the library again. I have no idea who or what was in there with me, but one thing's for sure, I don't want to find out.
These stories show how seemingly normal situations can quickly turn terrifying, testing our courage and survival instincts. Whether it's a quiet library or an empty parking lot, the fear of the unknown is something we can all imagine feeling. If you enjoy hearing more creepy stories like these, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Don't miss out on the next tales that will give you chills.